I was not in the room when it happened, but I heard every word later, replayed in whispers that shook people far more experienced than me. It began with a thud against the conference door and the secretary's voice cracking as she pushed inside. Breathless, saying, "You need to see this. Right now." Chairs scraped. A few directors stood as if bracing for an earthquake. Others froze halfway through signing contract packets, pens hovering uselessly. They all stared at the folder in her trembling hands as if it were a fuse already burning. And while the panic spread across that polished table in Louisville, Kentucky, my name sat printed at the top of the file they were about to open. My mind went back to the voice I carried through every sleepless night leading up to this moment, 3 days earlier. I had only complained about the staff lunches. That was all. I had walked into the Human Resources office with a straight back and steady breath, thinking I was trying to help the people who could not afford to speak up. I never imagined the new director, Marissa Cole, would fire me in front of everyone. I also never imagined she would make that decision before learning what I had already signed with headquarters in Chicago. The directors in that room did not know it yet, but the document in the secretary's hand held the proof that my complaint was never just about food. It was part of a culture audit that had been running quietly for months. Headquarters had chosen me because I had worked at Centriforge operations for 12 years without a single disciplinary note. That choice had consequences none of us expected. I heard later that someone whispered, "Is this real?" just before the secretary placed the file on the table. Her voice shook when she repeated, "You need to see this, all of you." By then, I was standing alone in my apartment kitchen, staring at my silent phone, waiting for whatever came next. And 3 days earlier, the entire chain reaction had begun, with a single tray of food in the break room. By the time I reached the break room that morning, the usual line had already formed. People kept their voices low, as if speaking too loudly might make the food worse. A tray slid across the counter toward the night shift processors, and one of them muttered, "It's colder than yesterday." His tone wasn't angry, just tired in a way that made me look twice. I stepped beside him. "Did you eat last night, Luis?" He gave a small shrug. "I ate half. Saved the rest for my kid." They should just tell us to bring our own food instead of pretending this counts. Behind him, a cleaner named Mrs. Tate murmured, "My stomach burned all night. Too much grease again." She lowered her voice. "Please don't say I complained. I can't lose hours." I nodded, keeping her trust. "You didn't say anything to anyone except me." She glanced at me with a kind of hope I did not deserve but could not ignore. I had been a single mother once, scraping by in this same building, counting on the cafeteria because I had no money for eating out. I remembered standing in this exact spot, praying the food would be warm enough and safe enough, and that no one would judge me for needing it. A temp worker approached, holding a tray with the corners sagging under congealed sauce. "Alara, look at this. We pay for this." His voice cracked. "This is not right." I exhaled. "I know. I'm going to talk to Human Resources again." "Talk?" Luis asked, surprised. "You think they'll do something, they will hear me," I said, though the confidence sounded borrowed from someone braver. As I walked toward the corridor, my coworker Devin caught up to me. "You're filing a formal complaint again. The new director starts today." "Maybe wait." I shook my head. "People are skipping meals. This cannot wait." Devin hesitated before whispering, "Just be careful. New leadership always looks for someone to test." I pressed my badge to the door scanner. If someone needs to be tested, it might as well be me. By the time I stepped inside the Human Resources suite, I already knew the complaint would mark the beginning of something I could not undo. The call came just after lunch, when the break room complaints were still echoing in my head. My phone vibrated with an unfamiliar Chicago number. I almost let it ring out, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Alara Monroe, speaking. A man's voice answered, calm but clipped. "Miss Monroe, this is Daniel Kerr from Centriforge headquarters. Do you have a moment?" I straightened in my chair. "Yes, I do. I'm calling regarding a confidential matter," he continued. "We've received a series of anonymous reports about internal hostility at the Louisville site. Headquarters has decided to begin a culture evaluation." My fingers tightened around the phone. "What does that have to do with me?" "We reviewed your record," he said. 12 years here. Not a single disciplinary mark. Consistent feedback about fairness. We need someone like you." He paused. We would like you to submit a formal complaint about the cafeteria conditions. Consider it a controlled test case. I blinked, unsure I heard him right. A test. Yes. We need to see how the new director responds to a legitimate concern brought through proper channels. Her reaction will be part of the evaluation. The room suddenly felt smaller. Daniel? If she retaliates, that is a possibility, he said. No hesitation. We cannot intervene or reveal your role until the evaluation is complete. Your risk is real. Real. The word hit me hard. I thought of my mother's medical bills, stacked neatly in our kitchen drawer. I thought of my daughter, 17 years old, trying to save for college by working weekends. Losing my job would cut our lives open. But I also remembered Mrs. Tate holding her stomach, Louise saving half a meal for his child, and every employee too afraid to speak. I swallowed. I'll do it. Daniel's tone softened. Thank you, Ms. Monroe. You may not see the impact right away, but this matters. When the call ended, I sat quietly, letting the weight settle. Somewhere in Chicago, my name had just been placed on a list I could not step off. And by the time the new director arrived, the test had already begun. Marissa Cole walked into the conference room as if she had been rehearsing the moment for years. Crisp suit, sharp heels, and a smile that looked professionally installed. People straightened immediately. Someone whispered that she had come from a Dallas consultancy known for tearing companies apart and rebuilding them without mercy. She opened with a bright tone. Good morning, everyone. Centriforge has potential, but it needs bolder leadership. We will eliminate inefficiencies, erase sentimentality from the workflow, and streamline every layer of our operation. Around me, managers nodded like they had been waiting for someone to say those words out loud. I kept my expression steady, though something inside me tightened. Marissa's gaze swept the room until it landed on me. You're Ilara Monroe, correct. 12 years here. Yes, I answered. Excellent. Legacy employees set the tone. I expect consistency. Her smile held for a beat before she looked to the next person. When she opened the floor for questions, I lifted my hand slightly. I submitted a formal concern to Human Resources this morning regarding the cafeteria vendor. Several employees have been? Her smile froze. We will discuss vendors later. She cut in smoothly. Right now, our focus is on culture alignment. The shift was immediate, clean, and absolute. Everyone heard it. I tried again. It affects morale. Some staff, Ilara, she said quietly, still smiling. Today is not the day for that conversation. A murmur passed across the table. She moved on before I could say more, launching into metrics and performance charts as if nothing had happened. After the meeting, I checked my inbox. No response from Human Resources. Not even a confirmation. I sent a follow-up. Still nothing. Devin appeared at my desk, voice low. She is watching everyone. Maybe lay low for a bit. I filed the complaint the right way, I said. She should hear it. He shook his head. She is looking to make examples. Just be smart. Marissa's door closed down the hall, the latch clicking with precision. I could still hear the crisp rhythm of her voice, every word trimmed of softness, every pause calculated. And the silence from Human Resources lingered like a warning I was not meant to ignore. Marissa called an afternoon leadership meeting with no agenda listed, which was never a good sign. Managers filed in with stiff shoulders, pretending not to look at me as I took my usual seat. Marissa stood at the front, hands folded neatly. Expression unreadable. Before we begin, she announced, I want to address an internal issue compromising our workflow. My stomach tightened. She looked directly at me. Ilara Monroe, she said, your recent behavior has created unnecessary disruption. Your complaint about the cafeteria vendor was not submitted in good faith. It was an attempt to undermine operations and destabilize morale. I leaned forward. That is not true. Employees are skipping meals. Someone needed to say. She lifted a hand. You have been here for 12 years, and yet you chose to escalate a minor inconvenience during a leadership transition. That is not dedication. That is sabotage. A few people shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. I followed protocol, I said quietly. The complaint was legitimate. People are getting sick from what we are serving. Marissa's tone sharpened. Your insistence proves my point. This company does not reward chaos. Effective this moment, your employment is terminated. The room went silent. My heart thudded once, hard, before settling into a numb rhythm. Devin stared at the table. Luis, who had been invited to observe the meeting, closed his eyes for a brief second, as if bracing for impact. No one else moved. I stood slowly. You are firing me for doing the right thing. Marissa's smile returned small, precise, victorious. I am removing an obstacle. There is a difference. Her assistant stepped forward with a manila envelope. I did not touch it. I walked out. Passing faces carefully hollowed into neutrality. Not one person met my eyes, and the absence of their gaze cut deeper than the words. By the time I reached the parking lot, my hands were shaking with something that was not fear anymore. It was resolve, quiet, sharp, and unbearably steady. That night, after everyone in my home had gone to bed, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You stepped into something bigger than lunch. I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of what I had started settle into place. I spent the night at the kitchen table with the overhead light humming above me, spreading every document across the wood like pieces of a case I had been building without realizing it. My termination packet sat unopened at the edge. I refused to touch it. I opened my laptop and began typing. First, the unanswered emails to Human Resources. I attached the timestamps. Then, the transcript I had written immediately after Marissa fired me, every word I remembered. Every moment she cut me off. Every phrase she used to frame me as a threat. I added notes from the cafeteria staff. Mrs. Tate's quiet confession. Luis saving half a meal for his child. The temp worker who looked at me as if his dignity were collapsing on a tray. Finally, I attached the formal complaint itself, filed properly, calmly, the way the company handbook instructed us to act. As I uploaded the evidence, my daughter, Rowan, wandered into the kitchen rubbing her eyes. Mom, you're still up? I just need to finish something, I said. She looked at the scattered papers. Is this about what happened at work? I nodded. Yes. She squeezed my arm gently. Then finish it. After she went back to bed, I recorded a short cover letter for the audit committee. I did not dramatize anything. I simply wrote the truth. At 3:47 in the morning, I hit send. The house was silent. I expected nothing from Chicago, at least not quickly. I turned off the kitchen light and sat on the couch, arms wrapped around myself, exhaustion pulling at my bones. I must have dozed off, because the buzz of my phone startled me. Gray light was just beginning to rise outside. A new message from an unknown internal address. We received everything. Do not come to work tomorrow. Watch what happens. No signature, no instructions. Just a thin thread pulling tight around the story I had stepped into. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying my breath, and waited for the day to begin. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone face up, the screen dark, as if it were holding its breath with me. Headquarters had told me not to come in. They had not told me what they planned to do. Every passing minute scraped against my nerves. At 9 o'clock sharp, the senior management meeting began in the Louisville conference room. I knew the rhythm of those gatherings by heart. Marissa liked to start with a statement that sounded like a promise, but landed like a threat. Centriforge cannot afford sentimental thinking, she declared. I could imagine her pacing, heels striking sharply. Starting today, we evaluate all roles tied to low-value tasks. Benefits will be streamlined. Productivity will increase. Compliance will be tightened. From what Devin later told me. Silence stretched across the table. A few managers exchanged uneasy glances. But no one spoke. Pushing back against a new director was suicide. She had made that clear when she fired me, Marissa continued. We cannot let emotional distractions slow us down. Complaints about meals, morale, or convenience will not take priority over operational demands. One manager tried to clear his throat. Some employees have expressed concern about Marissa cut him off. Concern is not a metric. Performance is. I could almost feel the tension through the walls of my home. These people had known me for years. Some had quietly supported me after meetings, slipping into my office to say they agreed with the cafeteria issue. But they also knew Marissa had the power to end their careers with one framed sentence. Devin texted me during the meeting. She is going after everyone now. No hesitation. It's like watching someone rearrange the company with a blade, I typed back. Hold steady. My hands trembled slightly. The audit notification had not arrived yet. I pictured the directors shifting in their seats, Marissa smiling that polished smile. Convinced she controlled the room, I kept my phone in my palm, waiting for the moment when the quiet inside that meeting would finally break. Devin told me later that the moment hit the room like a dropped match in a dry field. Marissa was mid-sentence, gesturing toward a chart projected behind her. This is where we trim low-value positions. If we restructure immediately, the conference doors burst open. The secretary stumbled in, clutching her tablet with both hands. Her voice cracked. You need to see this. All of you. Conversation died instantly. Marissa's eyes narrowed. What is this interruption? The secretary swallowed hard. Headquarters just issued an audit release. It went to every senior login at the same time. She set the tablet on the table. The directors leaned in. The silence sharpened as the document opened. Devin's voice trembled when he later told me, Your name was right at the top. Alara. One of the directors read aloud, barely above a whisper. Retaliation against an employee. Breach of human resources protocol. Suppression of welfare concerns. Another director pushed his chair back. This is serious. Marissa stepped closer, reaching for the tablet. Let me see that. But the secretary kept it angled away. There's more. Her fingers scrolled. Every manager stiffened when the final line displayed in bold lettering. Director Cole has failed the integrity benchmark and triggered automatic oversight procedures. A gasp cut through the room. Papers rustled. Someone muttered, This cannot be happening. Marissa's face lost its practiced confidence. This evaluation is incomplete, she said quickly. Someone is manipulating. A director interrupted her. The report includes transcripts, timestamps, and witness statements. Headquarters did not send this lightly. Another voice rose from the far end of the table. Why was the complaint ignored? Why was Miss Monroe fired after following protocol? Marissa tried to steady her tone. She was undermining operations. Devin later told me that the entire table shifted away from her in unspoken unison, as if the decision had already been made by some invisible consensus. And while the room fractured around her, my phone, still in my hand at home, lit up with a single new message from Chicago Phase 1 complete. The conference speaker clicked to life with a soft chime, and every person in that room straightened as the voice from Chicago filled the air. This is Executive Director Hall, the voice said calmly. We are joining to address the audit report you all received. Marissa tried to regain control. Director Hall, there has been a misunderstanding. I intend you will remain silent for this portion, Hall said, the tone firm enough to cut her off without raising volume. Your actions have already been documented. A director at the table nodded stiffly, relieved someone else had the authority to stop her. Devin later told me that Marissa's jaw tightened, but she obeyed. Hall continued. After reviewing the evidence, senior oversight has decided on immediate measures. Director Cole will not be terminated at this time. A flicker of hope crossed Marissa's face. Then the room braced itself as Hall finished. Instead, she will be reassigned to a remote branch in eastern Colorado under full cultural supervision. This reassignment is effective in 72 hours. The hope collapsed. One of the managers exhaled hard, another whispered, The quiet exile. Hall did not pause. Furthermore, human resources leadership at the Louisville site will undergo formal investigation for compliance breaches. Interim management will be appointed. Devin later told me the HR manager turned pale. Then Hall said words I never imagined would be spoken aloud in that room. We also wish to acknowledge Ms. Alara Monroe. Her documentation provided the clarity needed to protect staff welfare and correct systemic harm. Several directors shifted, suddenly aware of how they had looked away when I needed them. We would like to offer Ms. Monroe a newly created role, Hall said. Head of Employee Well-Being and Vendor Oversight, reporting directly to headquarters. The position will hold authority over cafeteria contracts, staff welfare programs, and compliance monitoring. Devin raised his head. That job should have been hers all along, he whispered to the person beside him. Across the room, Marissa sat rigid, absorbing the sharp edges of the moment she had created for herself. And in my living room, with my phone pressed to my chest, I felt a doorway opening towards something I had fought for long before I ever filed one complaint about lunch. 3 weeks after the audit, I walked back into Centriforge for the first time as the new head of Employee Well-Being and Vendor Oversight. There was no announcement, no parade, no forced smiles waiting in the lobby. Just the usual shuffle of morning shifts clocking in and night crews heading home. I preferred it that way. The break room door was propped open, and the smell hit me first: real food. Warm and seasoned. Not the pale trays we had come to dread. A man from procurement nodded at me with a shy smile. The new vendors started today. People are actually excited. Near the counter, a young cashier from the temp agency held a plate piled with roasted vegetables and fresh bread. She glanced at me, unsure. Ms. Monroe, we heard you had something to do with this. I shook my head lightly. I just passed along the truth. The rest came from everyone speaking up. Mrs. Tate, the cleaner who once whispered about her burning stomach, stepped toward me with hesitant steps. She touched the edge of the counter as if grounding herself. This is the first lunch in months that did not make me feel invisible. Her voice wasn't dramatic. It wasn't meant to be. It was simply honest. And that honesty lodged in my chest harder than any applause could have. Luis waved me over next. They added a subsidized plan, he said. I can bring home extra for my kid on nights I work late. I never thought they'd listen. I sat with them, feeling the hum of quiet conversation around the room. People laughed without looking over their shoulders. The new feedback board on the wall already had handwritten notes pinned to its suggestions. Compliments, small victories. Rowan texted me a simple heart. Mom, proud of you. I picked up my fork, breathed in the warm air, and felt a stillness I had not known in months. Lunch today really was fun, but not for the reason anyone expected. I knew something was wrong the moment the new CEO asked me to close the door. After 28 years at Architect Solutions, I had learned to read silence better than most people read code. Evan Mercer stood behind his sleek desk, hands folded like he was preparing a eulogy instead of a conversation. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost tender. Marina, you're getting older. You should rest. I stared at him, unsure if I had heard correctly. Evan kept his smile steady. The kind executives practice in leadership seminars. The kind meant to look humane while hiding a blade underneath. You have given this company everything, he continued. And we want to honor that by easing you into a gentler chapter of life. By firing me, I said. He blinked once, the smile tightening. Let's not frame it that way. I had built half the infrastructure this company still depended on. I wrote the scripts no one else could read, patched systems at 3 a.m, carried entire outages on my back while executives like Evan were still in school. Yet here he was, acting as if he were blessing me with freedom. Your severance package is ready, he added, and HR will help you transition smoothly. I logged out of my account in front of him, the cursor blinking like it was holding its breath. I set my badge on the table. Smoothly, I repeated, and my voice didn't crack, which surprised me. Evan murmured something polite as I walked out, but I didn't listen. The hallway was too quiet. No one met my eye. People who once depended on me now stared at their screens as if I were a ghost drifting past their desks. When I stepped outside, the air felt colder than it should have. I went home without calling anyone, without crying. I sat on my couch until the sky shifted to dawn. Then my phone began vibrating nonstop. Unknown numbers, former teammates, managers, and finally a name I hadn't seen in years. Reed Malcolm, the founder. His voice trembled. Help me, please. I set the phone down slowly, the sun rising through my window, and let the weight of everything settle before I stood up. When I stepped out of the building, the first thing I noticed was how no one followed me. Not a single voice called out my name. I had trained half the engineers on that floor, stayed late with them during outages, covered their mistakes, fought for their promotions. Yet when the door closed behind me, the silence felt final. I walked toward Pioneer Square, letting my feet decide the path. My phone buzzed once, an automated HR message. I opened it. The severance amount stared back at me: 3 weeks of pay for nearly 3 decades of work. I laughed under my breath, the sound sharp enough to sting. A message popped up from Noah, one of the junior engineers I'd mentored. I'm sorry, Marina. They told us not to get involved, I typed back. It's fine, then erased it and put my phone away. The streets were crowded with commuters already running late. A woman bumped into me and muttered a quick apology. I kept moving. My body felt like it was on autopilot. like I was walking out of a fire without realizing I'd been burned. I replayed Evan's voice in my head. "You're getting older." He said it as if age were a malfunction he needed to remove from the system. I had built the scripts that kept Architect's clients alive. When management refused to approve a full team, I wrote the monitoring tools myself. When they delayed hiring, I automated patches and rolled my own backups. Half of my work lived inside notebooks and local files, because the budget never allowed for proper documentation. I kept the company running with whatever scraps they gave me. And now they called it rest. I crossed the street and reached the waterfront. A ferry horn echoed across the water. I leaned on the railing and let the sound settle inside me. My chest felt tight, but not from grief. Something steadier was forming, quiet, sharp, deliberate. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door, set my bag down, and stood in the center of the room without moving. Hours passed before I even realized I hadn't eaten or turned on a light. But underneath the exhaustion, something new pulsed, resentment wrapped around a strange, growing calm. The kind of calm that makes decisions instead of excuses. I sat down, the room dim around me, and waited for whatever came next. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. Not one buzz, several, all overlapping. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. Then another vibration hit, sharp and insistent. I reached over, still half asleep, and saw a flood of notifications from Architect's internal channels. I no longer had access. Yet the public monitoring dashboards I had bookmarked years ago were updating in real time. Every region was in red. East Coast clusters down, shipping companies timing out, a major bank reporting authentication failures. I sat up, heart pounding but steady. I opened another dashboard, the one only senior architects used to track cascading failures. The graphs were collapsing faster than anything I had ever seen. My phone buzzed again. A call from a number I recognized, Jared. The overnight lead, I answered. "Marina, please tell me you know what's happening," he said, voice already cracking. "When did it start?" I asked. "Just before sunrise. We lost the token refresh cycle. The system rejected every backup key we tried." I closed my eyes. "Did anyone transfer my master admin credentials before I left?" He went silent. That told me everything. "Evan said he'd handle it," Jared whispered. "He told us not to bother you." More calls came in Noah, then Sam from the West Coast team. I ignored them all. I clicked through logs they had made public in their panic. The automated token rotations were failing exactly where I had warned they would years ago. No documentation, no redundancy. My handwritten procedure was still sitting in a notebook somewhere in Architect's storage room. Then Evan's name appeared on my screen. I let it ring until it stopped. A text followed immediately after. "We need you. Call me." I put the phone down, letting it buzz itself into exhaustion on the table. There was no urgency in my hands, no panic in my breath. I watched the dashboards collapse and listened to the phone vibrate again and again. Their world was shutting down, one system at a time. And I sat in the quiet of my apartment, deciding what I wanted to do next. The next call that came through wasn't from a frantic engineer or a desperate manager. It was a name I hadn't seen on my screen in years, Reed Malcolm. I answered before I could think. "Marina," he said, and the sound of my name in his voice pulled something tight inside my chest. "Tell me you're at home. I'm here," I said. He exhaled, shaky and unsteady. I had never heard Reed's voice shake, not during outages, not during high-stakes client demos, not even when our data center in Chicago flooded 10 years ago. But now his breath trembled like the floor was collapsing under him. "We've lost nearly every cluster," he said. "A shipping client in Vancouver is threatening legal action. A bank in Toronto has shut down online access. Our penalties are stacking by the minute." I replied. "Can you tell me what's causing it?" "Your system is rejecting all backup tokens," I said. "And my master credentials were never transferred." He stayed silent, and that silence told me he knew exactly what that meant. Finally, he asked, "Why weren't they transferred?" "You would have to ask Evan," I said. Reed cursed under his breath, not loudly, but with the weight of someone who had just put a fatal puzzle piece into place. "He told me you took an early retirement package. He said it was voluntary. Christ. Marina." He blindsided me. "Telling the board I quit was convenient for him," I said. Another long breath on the line, then Reed's tone shifted low. pleading, stripped of pride. I need you, he said. Just for a few hours. Come in. Look at the system. Help me understand how to stabilize it. The board is already sharpening their knives. I was fired yesterday, I reminded him. I know, and it should never have happened. His voice cracked again. Please? I built this company with people like you, not people like him. Help me keep it alive. I held the phone to my ear, listening to him breathe like the crisis was sitting on his lungs. The apartment around me was quiet, the world outside dimming into late morning. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I let his words settle between us, heavy and undeniable, as the call faded into silence. I didn't go to ArcTech right away. Instead, I called the one person who had seen me through every career storm I'd ever weathered, Lydia Tran. A private consultant who'd left the corporate world long before I found the courage to imagine doing the same. She picked up on the first ring. Tell me you're calling because you finally quit. I was fired, I said. There was a beat of stunned silence. Come over, now. When I arrived at her apartment, she already had her laptop open, spreadsheets pulled up, and a stack of legal pads scattered across her table. She didn't waste time. Start talking. I walked her through everything: the gentle firing, the token failures, the global outages, and Reed's call. Lydia listened without interrupting, tapping numbers into her calculator with quick, sharp motions. After a moment, she said, Marina, do you know how much ArcTech is losing right now? I have estimates, I replied. She turned her screen toward me. Try more than $3 million an hour from client penalties alone. And that doesn't include breach fines, lawsuits, or long-term contract losses. I stared at the number on the screen. It didn't look real. She kept going. If the system stays down another 12 hours, they are done. The board will implode. Clients will walk. The company will collapse within days. They want me to come back for a few hours, I said. Of course they do. Lydia's tone sharpened. They fired the one person who understood their systems. And now the building's on fire. Classic ArcTech. I'm not obligated, I said quietly. No on-call clause, no transition signed, nothing. Lydia leaned back, folding her arms. Then stop acting like you owe them something. I spent 28 years there, I said, and they threw you out with 3 weeks of severance, she snapped. You don't owe them loyalty. You owe yourself compensation. I didn't answer. Lydia leaned forward, her voice steady. You don't go back as an employee. You go back as someone who names her own price. Something inside me shifted, slow and undeniable, not anger, not pride, recognition. For the first time, I wasn't looking at what I gave them. I was looking at what it was truly worth. Lydia pushed a notepad toward me. Write down the number you should have been earning all these years. I set my pen to the paper, my hand steady for the first time since everything began. When I walked into ArcTech headquarters again, the lobby felt unfamiliar, like I was stepping into a place I used to dream about rather than the building where I had spent most of my adult life. Security glanced at my face, hesitated, then handed me a visitor badge. Contractor access only, the guard said. I clipped it to my shirt without a word. The badge felt lighter than my old one, but somehow it carried more authority. Upstairs, the moment the elevator doors opened, the noise hit me: panicked voices, rapid keystrokes, someone swearing under their breath. The outage had hollowed out the confidence that once filled these rooms. Noah spotted me first. He stepped toward me fast, relief flooding his face. Marina, thank God. We can't stabilize anything. Half the scripts aren't documented. We didn't even know where the master rotation file was stored. You were never trained, I said. He looked down. Evan rejected every request. Said cross-training wasted hours we couldn't bill. I kept walking. The old operations floor was chaos: engineers huddled around screens, managers pacing like the walls were closing in. The new CTO, a man named Brian Keller, whom I had only met once, rushed over. Marina, I'm glad you're here. I'll be honest, we didn't know where half your scripts lived. I met his eyes. That's because the team I asked for was never approved. He didn't argue. Reed wants to see you. Boardroom. When I entered, Reed was already waiting at the long table, sleeves rolled, eyes darkened by exhaustion. The board members on the video screens looked just as strained. Evan stood near the corner, stiff, avoiding my gaze. Reed gestured to the empty chair beside him. Sit, Marina. We need to hear from you first. I lowered myself into the chair, the visitor badge catching the light. The power in the room had shifted. They knew it. I knew it. And no one tried to pretend otherwise as the door closed behind me. Reed folded his hands on the table. Marina, start with what you need from us. Evan shifted immediately. We don't have time for negotiations. She should just Reed cut him off without looking his way. Marina. I spoke clearly, without raising my voice. $10 million up front. The room stilled. One board member on the screen leaned forward. Another muted herself, whispering to someone off camera. I continued. Full healthcare coverage until I reach retirement age. A signed statement acknowledging that I designed and maintained the core infrastructure for more than 28 years. And a freeze on any attempts to blame me for the outage. Evan barked a laugh. That is extortion. I didn't even turn toward him. It's compensation for decades of unpaid institutional knowledge. You're asking for an outrageous sum, he snapped. No engineer is worth $10 million. I looked at Reed instead. You called me because your systems are collapsing. You need stabilization now, not next week. I am not returning as an employee. I am offering to consult. Evan scoffed. Consult. This is ransom. Reed raised a hand, shutting him up. He turned to the CFO on the far end of the table. How much are we losing right now? The CFO swallowed hard. Factoring penalties from the shipping consortium, the Canadian bank, and the logistics network, more than $3 million an hour. The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend the table legs. Reed leaned back slowly and exhaled. Then he looked at me, his expression stripped of every corporate mask. And the last term I met his eyes. An accountability review for the CEO. Evan shot up from his chair. Absolutely not. This is insane. She's manipulating a crisis she created. I let the accusation float. No one picked it up. Reed stared at Evan for a long moment, then turned back to me. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Pay her. The board murmured approval, one by one. Faces on the screens nodded. Evan stood frozen, furious and powerless. The terms were on the table, and the decision was no longer his to make. The moment the funds hit escrow, Reed walked me straight to the war room. Every monitor glowed with alerts, and engineers filled the space with frantic whispers. When I stepped inside, the room quieted, as if the noise folded in on itself. Noah hurried toward me. We flagged 3 regions that won't even restart. The token registry keeps rejecting itself. Show me, I said. He pulled up the logs. I skimmed them for less than a minute before finding the problem. Who approved a bypass on the security keychain? Brian, the CTO, winced. Evan pushed it through during the holiday rush, said streamlining would save time. It saved nothing, I replied. You created a loop that invalidates every fallback protocol. Brian nodded. Then tell us what to do. I slid into an empty seat. We rebuilt the chain manually, region by region. For the next hour, the engineers followed my directions, typing line for line as I walked them through the forgotten architecture. Some systems were so deteriorated I had to rewrite patches from memory. Others were missing components entirely. This shouldn't have been your burden, Noah murmured as he worked beside me. It was never supposed to be one person's burden, I said. A young woman from the analytics team approached hesitantly. Marina, thank you. We wanted to tell upper management these gaps were dangerous, but they shut us down every time. You spoke up where you could, I said. That matters. By late afternoon, the last region stabilized. The room erupted with relieved sighs. Though no one cheered, the damage had been too deep, the cost too high. I handed Brian a detailed transition playbook, procedures, documentation guides, and warnings they could no longer afford to ignore. He accepted it quietly. We won't forget what you did today. I nodded, removed the visitor badge from my shirt, and stepped out of the war room, leaving the screens behind me. 3 weeks passed before the final blow landed. I was sipping tea at my kitchen table when my phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. Turn on the news. Now. A journalist's voice filled the room. Arctech Solutions faces internal turmoil after a leaked audio recording captures CEO Evan Mercer stating he fired senior architect Marina Hale because, quote, older workers cost too much and don't fight back. I set the mug down slowly. Another clip played Evan's voice, smug and careless. She was dead weight. Cheaper to clear her out before the restructuring. Reporters, analysts, and former employees erupted online. Words like age discrimination, executive negligence, and governance failure flashed across every segment. Within hours, the board released a statement announcing a formal investigation. Within days, they issued their verdict. Evan was terminated for cause. His severance was revoked. His performance bonuses were clawed back. And every tech publication in the region ran the same headline: ARC-Tech CEO removed after ethical breach and catastrophic mismanagement. Reed called me personally the morning after the announcement. "Marina, I want to say this publicly," he said, voice firm. "ARC-Tech is still standing because of you. I intend to make that clear." He did. His statement praised my expertise, my contribution, and the work that saved clients across North America. He made sure the industry understood exactly what happened. Then came the interview requests: magazines, podcasts, networks. Some wanted my side of the story. Others wanted me to help expose wider age bias in the tech outsourcing world. I declined them all. I didn't need a spotlight. I didn't need applause. I had what mattered: clarity, compensation, and the echo of Evan's downfall fading into silence. I closed my laptop that night, the weight on my shoulders lighter than it had been in years. I left Seattle at dawn with everything I owned packed into the back of my car. The drive south felt strangely weightless, as if some invisible cord tying me to the city had finally snapped. By the time I crossed into Oregon, the air smelled different, cleaner, calmer, like the life I had put off for far too long. The coastal town of Yachats had always been a quiet dream of mine. Years ago, during a rare week of vacation, I told myself I would retire here someday. That promise had been buried under release cycles, outages, and late-night emergencies. But now I was keeping it. I signed a lease on a small house overlooking the cliffs. The landlord, an older woman named Claire, handed me the keys and said, "It's peaceful here. People come to breathe again. That's what I need," I answered. A week later, I met with the local community college director and set up a scholarship fund, a program dedicated to women over 40 who wanted to re-enter tech. When she asked why the age requirement mattered, I told her the truth. "Some of us were pushed aside before we were finished," she nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure they get another chance." In the evenings, I checked the news out of habit. ARC-Tech was reorganizing its entire leadership structure. Reed was appointing interim executives and promising cultural reform. Evan's name surfaced occasionally, rumors that he had applied to several firms and had been rejected by all of them. His downfall felt distant, muted, almost irrelevant. One afternoon, I walked up to the cliff behind my house. Wind rushed against the rocks, carrying the roar of the ocean below. I sat with my hands wrapped around a warm mug and let the sound settle through me. The $10 million wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was a correction, a long overdue acknowledgement of the invisible load I had carried for nearly 3 decades. I didn't burn ARC-Tech to the ground. I simply stopped holding it up. And in the quiet of that small Oregon town, I finally understood what it felt like to choose myself.